our real challenge as a federal library community is answering this question about what matters most. And that circle that you see there says, am I on? If you have all of these things, you'll be able to discover which way to go. After I chose these pictures and put it together, I decided that really, over here, we probably should have about 5 or 6 different arrows. Because I don't think there's one solution, and I certainly don't think there's one structure or one answer or one defined set of services that will respond to these new requirements and new opportunities. One thing that this picture does represent, though, is the working collaboratively. And in a lot of the work I have done, I do a lot of facilitating and negotiating between different groups. Sometimes it's between clients and libraries, sometimes it's between libraries and their management, sometimes it's library to library. And what I find is that in Canada, in our federal library system, we have a long history of working cooperatively. And I choose that word specifically because working cooperatively means that we're working together to solve individual and separate problems. So we will work together, come up with a solution, and then we'll go home and apply it in our own department. When you work collaboratively, you're actually working for the good of the whole as opposed to the good of the parts. And I don't think that we have a lot of experience doing that. So I was glad to hear James say these are things that you can be trained in. You know, everyone thinks you can work collaboratively just naturally, but if any of you have been involved in any knowledge management support kinds of activities in your department, especially around collaboration, you'll find that it doesn't happen naturally at all, and that it really has to be worked on, and it has to be supported and encouraged. And it's not just the tools, it's the actual will to collaborate. So I think of all the changes the government's making, that one in the public service is probably going to make the most difference. The last point I want to make about what matters most is to ask yourself, and for everyone to ask that question, it's one of those big questions. What matters most? Does it matter most what our structure is? Does it matter most where our physical collections are? Does it matter most where we are in proximity to our clients? Or is it our purpose? And I think if you ask yourself what your purpose is, I think you will find that no matter what your structures and processes look like going forward, your purpose has remained the same, because your job has always been to get information to the person that needs it, preferably when they need it and in the form they need it, of course. I don't think that's going to change at all. I think how we go about doing that is going to change. If it hasn't already, for most of you, I'm sure it is. So to me, that was one of the big questions that should be asked in the list of characteristics of an innovative person: the observing, the listening, that kind of thing. The big question, the other big question everyone that I talk to is asking is, what will it look like? There seems to be some notion that there isn't it, and it would be some kind of new library. So here's a few answers that people have suggested various times. We think there'll be fewer traditional individual and departmental libraries. In other words, aggregation will occur. We will have national, in the sense of geographically pan-Canadian service. That service might be distributed, might be centralized, who knows. It certainly will in some way be virtual, and reference will just keep getting more virtual. And of course, all our resources will be digital. Well, most of our resources will be digital. Those that aren't already, will do our best to make them available digitally. I do think that the other thing I mentioned earlier, the wider range of services. And what's interesting about this is, as a library, you have, well, more than two, but you have two essential types of services. You have what we call a mass market service, which is anyone who is a client can call you and ask a question or borrow a book or do whatever service you provide, which means you're available to everyone. And you also have very specific personal services. You know, you have an individual with a specific question who needs a specific answer. So we still deal in both ends of the spectrum. And the question is, you know, how will those two spectrum evolve over time? I think there's going to be an increased focus on preservation of our physical materials, partly because they need it and have been sadly neglected for a very long time. I also think that for those materials that are not now or going to be available digitally or in electronic form, they are going to become very valuable. Probably not in my lifetime, maybe in yours, but they will be difficult to get hold of because they'll be locked away in some basement or vault and manage to survive several rounds of weeding and rationalization. So at some point in time, some of those physical resources are going to be extremely valuable and sought after, which will flip our coin again. And then the other great question that everyone asks is, will we have whole of government licensing? Which is a favorite topic of many individuals. We haven't had any answers. Have you had any answers on any of these, if you've asked these questions? The licensing question I love, because way back when I was a serials cataloger, which I loved, by the way, I can remember conversations with my colleagues in the library. At the time, it was the Geological Survey. And any given day of the week, we'd be saying, oh, if only we could do this, you know, and if only the system would do that. And, you know, if only we didn't have to go in and write on all these catalog cards. And if only clients wouldn't misfile things. And, oh, we had all kinds of things on our wish list. And I stand here today, and as far as I can remember, all of them have been fulfilled. And a lot of what we used to complain about just doesn't exist anymore because we went about solving the problem one way or the other. So whatever problems we're facing today, I'm sure we'll do the same. So one of those ones is this licensing issue. How can we make this so? A good one to think about. This picture, by the way, you're probably wondering about that, I should have mentioned. It's a 3D map of the World Wide Web, which you can find online. And it's anybody's guess, really, what it will look like. And that's just one view, I guess. So I was going on about this theme of collaboration. Community response, and I'm highly generalizing here. I'm sure you all have personal experiences, so please don't take my remarks amiss. But the community has responded. We have the strategic network has been formed. The librarians are talking about what it is we need to do. And there is a lot of talk. There hasn't been, as far as I can see yet, too much action. There's a sense of waiting for some announcement, and personally, I don't think it matters whether there's an announcement or not. There's lots of things that can be done. But what a collaboration requires to be successful is a shared vision, which means not 20 different visions. So that vision has to be clear and broad enough to encompass the purpose, but not necessarily the means. The common purpose is essential. And as I said, the community, the traditional library as a structure, as a set of services is being pulled apart in many different directions. And it's very difficult then to say, well, we're going to be this or we're going to be that. We're going to focus on these services. We're going to focus on this activity. And that's what a library is going to be. And the conversation is all about what a library will be in the future. Collaboration also requires willing participation, mutual respect, trust in the process and in each other. And while libraries have always willingly cooperated, they haven't always willingly collaborated, for sure. And there hasn't always been trust. In fact, there's been quite a lot of competition in between departmental libraries over the years, which can be a really good thing because it led to lots of interesting innovation as well. The other thing is the collaboration needs to concentrate on the outcomes and not concentrate on the processes and the decisions that can't be made before they're made. So you have to go up those stairs before you can see what's at the top of them. And you need to have the trust and work together to do that. And then there's the commitment to action. You can't work together without some kind of structure, so you need, conversation will not create action. You actually have to commit and say, yes, we're going to dedicate X hours and time and money to actually doing this. And then there's communication. And being librarians, of course, it's transparency is a value that most librarians have, so sharing and thinking out loud is really important. But there has to be some way to have the communication channeled to make the innovations possible. When I mentioned that the librarians or the libraries are being pulled in different directions, there are two things that are also clear in addition to the mass market service and the very specific personal services or project services, if you want to think about them that way, like research. There's also, I think, clearly a network role for the libraries, which means they're going to be part of a greater whole in some way or other, and there is a local role. Because there isn't any possible way that a whole of government service can continue to be relevant to its user community or its clients in the departments without understanding what those clients' needs are. So I firmly believe that it's important to keep librarians in the department as well as participating in a whole of government service. And I think anyone who has the opportunity to design that service or its structure should seriously consider that. So I do think for those of you who are familiar with the whole of government, the GCOLS model, I think it's called, Government of Canada Open Library Service. Have you seen that picture? I'm sorry I didn't bring it. It's on GCpedia. You know, there's a concept there that there's some things are central, some things are distributed, some things are clustered, some things are local. So GCOLS, GCOLS. Is that the Canadian Federal Library Strategic Networks document? It is, eh? Yeah. So all that information, I believe, is on the wiki or the GCpedia, right? It's where I saw it, so I'm figuring it's out there. These are concepts. We have no idea who or when is going to implement them.